But let's face it, most of the documentaries that are made about true crime are not journalistic in nature.
This was Bart Layton's directorial debut, and he won a BAFTA for it. I am very surprised at that. I do not think this is BAFTA material.
The guy has gone on to make crime thrillers. He hasn't made any documentaries after this. Like, he clearly wanted to do that. This was just like a story that he wanted to do, I guess. So he made this into a thriller.
There's a lot of true crime shows out there and documentaries out there. So I just feel like it was a little meh.
Yeah, that's why I call it like a cheat documentary. Like, you can tell someone that you watched a documentary today. Hello and welcome to another episode of Escape into Reality. This is a podcast where we review a documentary and we take that as a jumping off point to start our own discussion. Today's documentary is The Imposter. This documentary came out in 2012 and was directed by Bart Layton. It's one of those documentaries which is about a case that happened a few decades ago, so there is some interest about the case, and it's in the true crime documentary genre. So before we get into it, let's hear a summary.
Sure. So the documentary is about Frédéric Bourdin, who is a French serial imposter, and he pretends to be Nicholas Barclay, a 16-year-old American boy who went missing from, I really want to say like 1995 to 97. So the documentary covers how Frédéric impersonated Nicholas, how he managed to fool the US government and Nicholas Barclay's own family to come back to America, and how eventually everything came crashing down and people discovered the truth of who Frederick really was.
Thanks for that summary, Nats. We normally like to recommend the documentary, but from the response I got during the week, I don't think we would also be recommending this documentary to anyone. So I kind of want to hear why you did not enjoy the experience or wouldn't want someone else to experience it. Why don't we start with you, Shantanu?
Firstly, I'll say that I generally don't like true crime documentaries in the first place. So, this documentary had a low chance of success with me from the get go. But apart from that, I think it's one of those documentaries that show up on TV at 12 at night, and it's very low budget, and it's shot in a very, let me just keep your attention for as long as possible. But there is not much of a story there, honestly. That's why I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, I really agree with that. It definitely has that feel to it. What about you, Hamad?
It was not bad, but I would at the same time say that there's some parts where it just feels they're like dragging it. Like it has good source material and everything. But I would only give it like a 5 on 10 or like a 4 on 10. There's a lot of true crime shows out there and documentaries out there. So I just feel like it was a little meh.
I honestly don't think it lives up to the hype, but what about you, Nats? Would you recommend this doc?
I agree with Shantanu and Hamad in parts because like I haven't seen a lot of true crime, and the true crime I have seen has been pretty crap. And the most interesting thing is this was Bart Layton's directorial debut, and he won a BAFTA for it. I am very surprised at that. I do not think this is BAFTA material. So yeah, I feel like this is a documentary that's interesting to watch with friends to talk about it later.
I would actually recommend this to a certain kind of person who maybe is looking to cheat on their documentary watching, because maybe it's not shot like a thriller, but it's really edited like a thriller. When you're watching it, it doesn't really feel like you're watching a documentary, at least in my experience. And I kind of want to take that as a segue into just the genre of true crime. What you said about you not having seen much true crime, I would actually argue that They Shot the Piano Player is like a very nice outlier in that genre, because technically it is true crime, but the fact that it doesn't seem like it fits the other criteria that true crime docs have, I think is what makes it so nice. I mean, you are getting a different experience of still like a true crime story, but you are, instead of it being more about experiencing violence, you are experiencing it through colors. But I mean, this, it's not even so good in that it explains the story really well. I've been waiting to hear Shantanu's views about this, knowing that he doesn't like true crime.
Okay, so there's this Substack writer I really like. His name is Ted Goya, and he writes a newsletter called The Honest Broker. And he recently wrote this article about how the media industry used to have this distinction between art and entertainment. And I mean, yeah, it's a very binary thing, and I know a lot of professors who would be very mad at me saying art and entertainment are different. But we can make a very basic argument that okay, art is something that asks something from society, and entertainment is something which is provides society what it wants. Entertainment is usually like okay, you want a certain type of content and I'll provide you with that certain type of content. And art is usually you are asking something from society, either political or cultural or anything along those lines. But he argues that what has happened in the last few years since the internet and social media has taken over most of the media landscape is there's a third type of content, and is dopamine content, which is purely addictive in nature. It doesn't even provide entertainment really. It just sort of you just sort of get addicted to it. As this is like Instagram reels, what a lot of people will call brain rot and stuff like that. I think true crime sits somewhere between entertainment and dopamine, where it is somewhat entertaining, but it has these. There's something about true crime that really hooks onto people's psychology, because people who watch true crime watch a lot of true crime, and they keep coming back to it again and again and again. And I think it hooks onto something very base psychology about like something about safety in our human brains that we just keep coming back to it. And once you start watching a true crime show, because it's mystery, you don't want to stop before you finish it completely. So I really don't like the genre because it's very addictive, but it's never telling you anything particularly interesting. And the cases are so far removed from what most people experience in their daily lives. But if you keep watching true crime, your brain kind of thinks the world is a lot more dangerous place than it is. It's just exposure to one particular type, one aspect of society that you kind of your brain will generalize as all of society as like criminal, which is not true. So that's my big rant against true crime.
I mean, I kind of do agree with a lot of things that you said, and the way you describe true crime being somewhere between entertainment and dopamine, just like fueling an addiction. I think that also very perfectly describes some sort of content that people who enjoy conspiracies would enjoy. And I think that was one of the main reasons why this documentary also became or just did so well in terms of viewership. It goes on for too long and it doesn't explore the actual conspiracy that the filmmaker wants to put forth. It just sort of talks about it a little bit at the end, and that's about it. I mean, even for the people who this is right up their alley, like a story like this where someone is just trying to imply another layer to the whole story, this is right up their alley, and even they don't get to enjoy this documentary. In true crime, when you want to show a story, there is always going to be an element of what good is this doing for the people who have suffered because of this. It could be victims, it could just be people related to the victims whose involvement, whose connections get exposed because of this documentary. Oh, Hamad wants to say something.
I want to counter Shantanu on his rant.
Go ahead.
Sometimes I think it's important to at least know of the crimes going around, because what I have learned from my, research into cases and everything is how incompetent the cops are in India. How police procedurals can like completely be ignored, and some of it is just so funny. Like I'll just give a small example: the 2008 double murder in Noida. Later came to light that nobody could be convicted in that double murder because everybody just walked over the scene. Media people, because the cops just didn't seal this. I think there are multiple layers to it, and like I understand like what Shandu was saying about the paranoia, but I guess yeah, you do get a kick out of it. And at least with me, I've just seen that initially when I generally tend to consume true crime in podcasts. I would completely go through the whole list, And then after I'll just be like, okay, what can I listen to now? Now I know of all these crimes. The next thing you know is that what I found is like some podcasts initially I was impressed by them. And then later it just turns out that like I know better than them in the sense like they end up omitting major information, like they end up, how do you say, giving wrong information. So I think the best true crime sources are like when detectives do it. So there's a podcast called Crime Junkies, and it's based in the States. Now, those are some proper people doing like proper research on it. I feel it has its merits as well.
I'm really glad you mentioned Burari because that case also has a documentary on it, which I'm not particularly fond of, but like we can talk about that later. I
It's a very lame documentary if you're talking about the
Yeah,
one on
that
Netflix.
it's
It's really bad.
almost entirely
It's
like this
really
in
bad.
that it doesn't satisfy your curiosity about the case at all. But yeah, do you want to say anything about? Okay, Shantanu wants a rebuttal. Let's go.
Yeah, so I mean, I mostly agree with Hamad that there is a place for true crime. Like, there is idea that true crime could be good journalism, right? Like, that it's like a journalistic endeavor. But let's face it, most of the documentaries that are made about true crime are not journalistic in nature, and most of them are meant for entertainment and they're consumed for entertainment. It's a lot like news in the TV today, which is also mostly just made for entertainment and consumed as entertainment. So in that sense, I mean, I agree with you that it could serve a very important journalistic purpose, and there are many true crime documentaries that do this, but a majority of them just don't.
Like the Indian true crime documentaries I have found are really dog shit. So there's this one very famous cannibal case. Like this guy, he was like supposed to be like a cannibal and everything, and like India Today produced that documentary. And it was so bad. Like I'll tell you what really turns me off from a documentary when you put in that Ekta Kapoor level serial music in it. And at that point, I'm not scared that this man is eating other humans. Like at that point, I'm just like, okay, bro, can you stop? Yeah, I totally agree with him. Most of it is just crap. I don't even want to call it entertainment because, like, I think the investigation is very, very interesting to me. How people find out. And that brings me to two very cool subjects I found out because of true crime. One is OSINT, which is open source intelligence, and the other is forensic stuff, which I'm pretty interested in, but it's out of my depth in the sense like it has a lot of science. But like these are two very cool things which have helped solve so many murders in the last 40 years. Yeah, last 40, 30 years, not even 30 years, because like at one point it was like really, really slow.
I mean, you would think that the sort of power of OSINT would enable people, just ordinary people, to actually, dig up extra information about a case before they make a YouTube video. But often we find that it's just like they know there is some curiosity regarding certain search phrases and they just want to capitalize on that. And they also want to deliver like that. I think that's what you were trying to say with your short rant about like the Indian subgenre of true crime, because it always comes off as sensationalism, right? With those Ekta Kapoor edits, where it's like the story. I feel particularly bad because I think that India has some really like creative criminals, and we don't get to see their work put to use. Like these fucking hacks come
I
in
know.
and they just
I
butcher their
it's
crime.
Yeah, it's dude, like some of the crimes are so insane. Like those people in Gujarat who set up that fake IPL and then they were like rushing
Yeah,
betting on it.
exactly.
That's some
They're
crazy
so
stuff.
fucking creative.
They're so creative. And like I'll tell you another thing is just sensationalism, right? Like what Shantanu said about news. Like it is so stupid. Like let's just like hop on back to COVID and when that Sushant Singh Rajput episode happened, dude, there was like it was like some batshit crazy shit going on TV. I seriously remember this one TV channel with the headline. Not with the headline, it was actually a proper person to camera. And it was literally like बंगालन लड़की ने बिहार के भोले भाले लड़के को काले जादू में कर दिया खत्म. And I'm like, bro, that's slander. That's also defamation. And it's just going on. And now people are like, yeah, black magic was involved. And then another day I turn on the TV, it's like, yes, Akshay Kumar has killed off Sushant Singh Rajput because Sushant had created a game to rival PUBG called 4G, and then Akshay Kumar stole it from him. And then there was also this other really conspiracy theory that Xi Jinping had Sushant killed off because Sushant knew about COVID and knew the cure for coronavirus, so the Chinese bumped him off. are you seeing, like, this is not like, this is my problem. At one point it's not factual, it's just like anything, do anything you feel like.
Dude, I'm honestly like scared about an Indian AI that they're working on, because they're going to use that to create these new headlines to like show up on those breaking news segments. And they're already so fucking whack. I can't imagine what like LLM generated Hindi headlines would even be like.
It might actually improve it.
I agree with Shantanu, will actually improve it because that's how low the bar
Dude,
is.
but their training data is bound to be muddled, right? Like, I feel like because of that, it's not going to be better. I mean, I guess we should get back to the victims. They are not being very exploited in this podcast, at least. But yeah, I know you have some thoughts about this, Natalia.
The biggest thing about like victims being exploited was when Dharma came out on Netflix and it became super popular. I didn't watch it because I cannot do horror in any way, shape, or form. But I remember one that a lot of people immediately just kind of like fell in love with Dharma, which was really weird, to the point where they like dressed up as him on Halloween, and that the families were just like harassed and trolled and just like stalked because the show was that popular and it got that much attention. And the families essentially blamed Netflix for like digging up this horrible past, and like obviously Netflix did nothing because like they're a studio. I highly doubt they would do anything. And I feel like true crime, like the whatever true crime I've seen, does tend to do this. Like, for example, with this documentary, right? Like with Imposter, we now know like quite a lot about the Barclay family. We don't know enough, but we know like a fair amount, like enough for a few very determined people to figure out like where they live and their address. And if you wanted to, you could very much like pursue them and ask them questions yourself or like send them things and things like that. And I'm sure people have, because the documentary did get pretty popular. And I don't think the director would have offered any sort of like safety or security to the family. If he wanted to focus on Frederick Bourdain, he could have done so without focusing on like this one case, because I after watching the documentary, I looked him up, and Frederick has gone on to pose as young lost children again. Like after he was caught and sent back to France, he posed as like a 14-year-old French boy, and then he posed as like a 15-year-old Spanish boy. So like obviously if you want to do a documentary on Frederick, you can't just do it on him without highlighting like this one single family. So I feel like with true crime, I don't know, I feel like exploiting victims' families doesn't have to be baked into the genre, but it feels like it is. Or because even with the Cecil Hotel, a fucking rubbish documentary on Netflix, by the way, because it starts off with this whole mystery of how this girl died at the hotel. And like 6 hours later, you find out that she was bipolar and she committed suicide. And it's like, I lost 6 hours of my life over this. And like it just like exposes her entire like history, like her entire mental history and all the trauma that she was going through for like no particular reason. There was no real reason to do that. Like this, it didn't need to be made. There was no real story to tell. It was just a woman struggling with mental illness, and she lost. Yeah. This is also why I don't really like true crime.
Your story or like your experience of watching the Cecil Hotel documentary sounds a little bit like the documentary we discussed a few weeks ago. Icarus, if there was no pivot, I think could very well have
Yeah.
just been like, I don't know how to fucking end this doc. I started recording and shit, but like,
Dude, the Cecil Hotel, it was so bad because one entire episode, it was 3 episodes long, one entire episode was just dedicated to all the theories and bullshit that YouTubers and fucking True Detective Reddit subreddits had come up with. Like a solid hour of just fan theories, because there was nothing to tell about this documentary, so they padded it with people's bullshit. I should have stopped watching at that point, dude. I should have been like, why am I watching this random fucker on YouTube talking about this murder? Bro, that was bad.
I think that's a really good segue into my little bit about true crime as a genre, because you can really call it names, but the fact of the matter is that there seems to be quite a big audience for it. And we see this quite a lot when we discuss something like even fictional violence, like when it's a crime thriller and not a true crime doc. A lot of people don't understand the appeal in watching violence, because for one, it's not real. I mean, it's constructed. It's not like they're there with cameras while the crimes are being committed. But I've always thought of true crime as being a little bit of a cheat in that sense, because it's the violence is real, but I mean, at least I think this is why people tend to enjoy true crime, because the crime has been real. They always seem to have this one constructed footage or scenes to show the viewers, how it could have happened. And I think there is definitely an audience for that. South Park also spoke about this like a long time ago, because they saw that there was like a huge audience for this, that they obviously made fun of it. They made it out to be like a sort of genre in pornographic content, where older people in the town were watching these true crime docs, and they were using it like an aid during sexual activities, like you just keep it on and that sort of gets you horny. But it's weird to think that there definitely is like even a documentary as bad as The Imposter, which, and I'm saying bad as in like the experience of just viewing it and how you feel after it's done. Even though it's bad, I mean, it's a successful documentary. Like when you think about it, the guy has made a career out of just this one documentary. And before we actually discuss his career, I just wanted to add that when I say this is like edited like a thriller, the guy has gone on to make crime thrillers. He hasn't made any documentaries after this. Like he clearly wanted to do that. This was just like a story that he wanted to do, I guess. So he made this into a thriller. We can use that as like a segue into just the filmmaking or the style of this documentary. It feels like true crime, the generic true crime that we are used to. But like I said, it also feels like a thriller. It's edited like a thriller. When the sister was describing her brother, and we know that this imposter does not have the same facial features, it immediately cuts to the imposter looking in the camera and being a little disheartened, even though this is obviously happening years later when they're doing this interview. But he edited it to show that this guy, he doesn't really have much to prove his identity. And then finally she says, oh, he also had a noticeable gap within his teeth. And that is one feature that the imposter does have, and immediately it cuts to him just smiling, showing off proudly that little gap in his teeth. And it's shot so much like an actual film, sorry, edited so much like an actual film. And I think that really helps it to maintain the interest of the viewer. But I mean, yeah, this, for someone who doesn't or isn't enjoying watching this, I guess that could be painful. Yeah, what do you think about this,
I think
Shantanu?
there's a lot of techniques used in this documentary that have become quite common now. A lot of it just seemed like a YouTube video more than a documentary or even a film, like a video essay. So how does the documentary maintain interest? It's very much like a Mr. Beast video in that it tries to keep you engaged throughout. There's not even a little moment where it's you could get bored or it lets things play out. It just sort of keeps giving you more and more information and keeps adding mysteries, keeps creating these little curiosity gaps, that get filled up 2 3 months down the line. And as soon as that gets filled up, some other person in the like the FBI agent will be like, but what about this? And when that gap gets filled up, the detective will go, but what about this? And then it just keeps doing that again and again and again till the end. So there's always like your brain is like constantly engaged. There's always something to think about as you keep going. It's very much what Mr. Beast does in every one of his videos, that he'll just tell you what he's going to do, creates these little gaps of curiosity. Classic technique. Everybody does it now. When this documentary was made, it was probably not that common, so it probably kept people a lot more engaged than it would today. And the other thing that kind of actually annoyed me was that the this is done by most true crime documentaries, if not most documentaries, where you do interviews, but you don't have original footage of the thing that happened, so you make recreations. But the recreations in this were so dramatic, and so like they were like full Ekta Kapoor style recreations, and that really got to me. I don't know what to tell you. It was just it was so dramatic that it was all borderline funny. And like even the colors are all dark, grungy, grainy. It's all so dramatic for something that does, like, for a story that didn't seem that dramatic. So that's why, like, that's the thing about this, which it feels like there was not much substance to it, but there was a lot of style to it.
It seems that they recreated scenes that didn't need to be recreated, right? Like him in the fucking in front of the police and all. It didn't even seem like it needed to be recreated. To go so overboard in doing something that was overall would be considered unnecessary for the doc. In this documentary, you can very clearly see the filmmaker impact how the story is told. And before I go on, I would like to hear what Nats has to say.
Like, I mostly agree with Shantanu that the film is a lot more dramatic than it is like a retelling or like an exploration of the guy's crimes. And like, yeah, even when they recreated like him going to high school and like getting on like the school bus and stuff was kind of weird. I don't know. It just felt so uncomfortable, especially when you know he's a grown man and he looks like a grown man and they're recreating like him going to school, and it's a little bit like, why does this need to be
To
done?
be fair,
This
I think America has a lot of like older kids going back to school. I mean, just to be fair.
wouldn't that be like a GED, like evening classes and stuff? It wouldn't be like a 23-year-old going to the same like high school as
That's just preposterous anyway.
But yeah, I feel like, I mean, even in terms of, would this be an interesting, like if Brian, is that the director's name? Yeah, if he didn't make this documentary, would it still be like an interesting story? Like, is it worth telling? I think Frederick as a person is far more interesting than like this one singular crime, because he has done it again and again. And I would much rather watch a documentary that follows him trying to impose as several different young boys and getting caught each time. I think that would be far more interesting than, following like this one thing, especially because there's no real conclusion to it. And what I like really did not like in the documentary was how it ended. It ended with, the one conspiracy theory that they throw out is that the family killed Nicholas, and they just took him in because they were like, yes, okay, a perfect a substitute for our son who we murdered has walked into our lives. How convenient. And they dig up the garden because the private investigator is like, I think they buried Nicholas in their own garden. And obviously they find nothing. That doesn't hold up. There is no evidence. The case is dropped. But the documentary still ends with the private investigator and someone else just digging into the garden and standing over this huge hole. And that's the last scene. And it ends on this assumption of like, have they found something in the garden? Like, has there been something that they have not revealed to us? And it's like, what the hell, man? Why are you planting this seed in people's minds of like, this family has killed their son when they didn't? Like, there is no evidence to prove that. It feels like such a cheap shot to take, and something to like Shantanu said, something to just keep the audience's interest engaged, because after a certain point there's nothing more to say with this particular story. And instead of going to say his next crime, you just end on like a lie. You just end on an outright lie.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that because that's sort of the point I was trying to make when I say that, like, even a conspiracy theorist is not going to be fully satisfied after watching this documentary because they're going to think, okay, I mean, this is a documentary. You can't really do open ended endings in this. Like, this is not the place to be like, oh, you can think about how this story ends in your own imagination. But going back to like the role of the filmmaker or the documenter, actually I would like to like reference Icarus because there we see like a filmmaker actually have an outcome in how a story evolves, like not story as in like the story of a film, but the actual case that he was making a film on, he actually had an impact on what the outcome of that case was because of his involvement. But here it's more like, I mean, funnily enough, the filmmaker is imposing himself on the story. He's trying to make it about his imagination. Like he calls the documentary The Imposter, but it's really about Nicholas Barclay, not so much about Frederick. There was even a movie about the imposter himself, a fictional movie, which again goes into why there was so much interest about this story in the first place. And even those people were, I guess, dissatisfied or unsatisfied because they didn't get to really find out too much about the imposter himself. Instead of they're being told something about Nicholas Barclay probably being murdered by his own family. It seems more of a like a blueprint for here's the information, now you make your own conspiracy theory out of it. I'm sure you have a wild imagination, dude. Go for it. Like here is everything that happened. Why don't you let me know in the comments, sort of? What do you think about that, Hamad?
See, that's the problem. Like, they want us to think and all, and that woman who interviewed Bourdain, she like, I just feel like it's incomplete at the end of it. Like, even if they want us to like make up our own minds, towards the end, the family comes out looking very, very suspicious, right? Like, the mom also doesn't mention that she has like a huge abuse issue, and like then we are like left wondering what happened to Nicholas Barclay. And in this case, what I think is he just ran away from home because everybody was so shitty, and because like mom has substance. And another thing is like it was not the first time Nicholas ran away from home. Like when he disappeared this time, I think it was the third or second time. Like it had happened before. So I just think like he bounced. He was like, bye bye, you problem, you opiate addicted people. I'm leaving you. And he's probably chilling somewhere and he's like, fuck this. I don't want to deal with this shit. And I guess like they were just like very guilty. So they were like, yeah, maybe this is Nicholas or it could be much darker. But I would like to go with this theory because really shitty household.
Like, I agree with Hamad in the sense of like they portray the family in a very suspicious manner, but that is like very clearly the director's choice to do so, because that also encourages like discussion, and it encourages people to like talk about the documentary and to like watch it and engage with it, because he could have gone in like a very different way and made the family much more sympathetic. I feel like it could have been very possible to edit the documentary and frame the family as like a grieving family that lost their son, and they're all like the mother's also struggling with addiction, and it's like a much more sad scenario versus like a shady one. This is like a very deliberate choice to make the family look as suspicious as possible, which is also like a not nice move. Because you're like very deliberately painting this family in like a very unflattering light. But no, I just wanted to say that that is a choice that was made, and it wasn't just like the family being, I mean, I'm sure the family has secrets to hide, like most families do.
And it's also not as if the family hasn't suffered enough. I mean, for one, they actually did lose their son.
Yeah,
Eh,
exactly.
he didn't return. And not only did they lose their younger son because of the whole affair about his return, they also lost their older son. So that was one thing I specifically didn't like about the documentary, is that they had an interview with a friend of Nicholas from when he disappeared. Why wouldn't you, like, if you were going to make a documentary about Nicholas, why not go deeper in that direction? I mean, that just seemed like, oh, you spoke to these people. Why can't we hear more about that? Like, why do I have to keep listening to his sister talk about drinking Coca-Cola in France or Spain or whatever? I would like to take their advice and make up our own conspiracies about this, because they did leave it hanging sort of in the end. They don't really show us if he managed to find the body in the backyard. I mean, if they didn't, then I don't know why he would even put that scene in there. I mean, it's such a weird way to end a documentary, I just felt like. But we can come up with something of our own. Does anyone want to volunteer?
Sure. I think that the family was involved in some real shady shit that involved Nicholas. And I think this because Frederick frames it in the documentary. Because So for context, within the documentary, Frederick is giving, like, he talks through his whole process about like how he managed to find out that Nicholas is a boy who's missing, how he managed to take over that identity, and how he managed to fool the embassy. And how he managed it is in large part due to the sister's help, because the sister comes to Spain and says, "Oh, yes, you are my long lost brother Nicholas." And Frederick goes, I am so traumatized, I don't remember anything. And the sister then gives him like very crucial information as to like who he is, who like the family is, who his friends are, all these details about his life, and shows him pictures and everything. And it's these details that help him prove that he is Nicholas to the US government. And so he gets an American passport. Like they give him a new passport because they're like, oh, if you know these things, then you must be Nicholas. It's stuff like this and how easily the family accepts him that even Frederick is put off by this. And even Frederick is so confused by it that he then reveals that he is not Nicholas. And he thinks that the family has done something to Nicholas, which is why they were so accepting of him. And I kind of believe that. I really feel like, I mean, one, like the mom has like an opiate addiction, and so does the brother. I feel like there is some real trafficking thing involved, and that's how Nicholas got tangled up in it, and that's how Nicholas disappeared. And then when Frederick came in as Nicholas, they were like, yes, this is a great way to like close that little loop, like close that end and get our son back. And obviously this imposter isn't going to say anything because he's lying to us, so it's fine. That's what I believe. And they're in Texas, you know, there's some real Breaking Bad shit happening there.
I mean, okay, so I definitely do agree with you when you say that Frederick himself started sort of blowing the whistle on his crime. It seems a little absurd to me that someone who's sort of lived a more of a bandit like lifestyle is all of a sudden like scared to be around people who are supposedly like accepting him as family. So that definitely does seem like a red flag. But I don't think they were involved in any actual, like you said, trafficking, which I really don't believe could be true. Because for one, like when they spoke about their life in 1994, it didn't really seem like they were doing like really well financially. I'm not saying that if you commit crime, you are supposed to just be rich, but it doesn't really seem like, you know, they were doing something shady, like a Breaking Bad sort of situation, and Nicholas just happened to. I mean, at least that's what I'm reading from this. What about you, Shantanu? Do you want to poke holes in her theory, or do you want to present your own?
All right. So I'll start with this. So I saw this interview Frederick did with Vice Media, where he's telling the stories about how he fooled people and how he stole identity 50 times throughout his life. And the really interesting part about that interview is every time he managed to do it and he was telling the story about it, he was smiling about it. He was very proud of what he had done. And there was like zero remorse. There was zero introspection. And watching that interview made me realize that this guy is just has some psychological issues, and he just likes stealing identities and bullshitting. And so anything he says cannot be trusted at all. And once you make that assumption, all the accusations against the family just crumble instantly, because the entire accusation against the family hinges on him. All the accusations hinge on him telling the truth, and I'm 100% sure he's not telling the truth. So I think what has happened is he just made shit up because he likes making shit up, and he's just a serial, not a killer, I guess. I mean, he's like a serial identity thief person. He likes it, he enjoys it, and he just kept doing it. He went back to France after that and he did it 3 4 more times. He made up an identity in Spain about a person who had lost his parents in the Madrid bombings, but like the person was entirely made up, and he's done this so many times. So I think he just kind of bullshits, and he's very good at bullshitting. He's probably very good at acting, and he just said stuff. The other thing is, I really think at the start of the documentary they show him leaving Spain for America, and I think the entire American embassy in Spain did a really bad job at identifying him, confirming he says who he is. They didn't match his fingerprints to anything at all. The orphanage saw him with black hair, and then he dyed his hair later, and then he went back the day he was gonna leave and meet the people, and he had different color hair, and nobody was like, why does he have different hair? I don't get that. Like, so the entire thing in Spain just seems shady. I don't know why, but it just seems shady.
I mean, I don't really want to defend my conspiracy theory because it is very much like a, ooh, who knows if this could have happened. I have like no real stake in it. If you guys don't think it's true, that's cool. Yeah, that's fine. Because I do agree with Shantanu in terms of like he seems like a pathological liar. And I wanted to like comment on the US embassy in Spain like really failing in every single junction. I feel like even the orphanage where he first went kind of like failed in the sense of like they let him sleep in the office alone overnight, which gave him access to a phone which he then used to impersonate like a police officer in Spain. So how he found, like, so for context for listeners, because I don't think you should watch this documentary, he managed to find out that Nicholas Barclay is missing by calling various like police stations in major metropolitan areas in the US and saying, hey, we have like there is a young man here. He seems to be like 14, 15, and he says he's American, but he isn't really willing to talk. So do you have any like missing cases and things like that? And that's how he found that Nicholas Barclay is a boy who's missing, and that's how he was able to like take over that identity. But I guess my first question would be, why would an orphanage just let this minor, this unaccompanied minor, sleep in the office alone overnight? Doesn't that raise like so many red flags? Wouldn't you want him to have like a hot meal and sleep in a bed where other adults are there to provide like some sort of safety and protection and shit? I don't know, man. Like the fact that he was able to do that, it's such a failure on the system. And then it just keeps getting worse and worse. Like everyone just lets him kind of do whatever he wants to do, and he's able to do it, and he gets into America. Like that's the wildest thing. I can't imagine like all of these like institutions and stuff just basically going, yeah, you can do this, yeah, go ahead, you dye your hair, no one's gonna know, and just it's insane.
Dude, in defense of that, I honestly think the European people were probably like they believed that this was Nicholas Barclay, and they were just like, yeah, this is just some weird Yankee. Let him dye his hair. I don't know why he needs to dress up to meet his sister, but if he wants blonde hair, I guess he can get. Yeah, dude, it honestly is kind of weird that how did he even get dyes? He even talks about getting tattoos while he's at the orphanage. I mean, it just seems very outlandish, but also he is like a con man. So I'm guessing just they're also not expecting him to be very cunning, right? Like their guard is down because he's pretending very well to be a kid, so they're giving him the benefit of the doubt basically. And I'm guessing he is good at what he does. I mean, he does claim to have stolen the identities, or at least impersonated or copied identities of 500 different people. I'm sure he's considering like impersonating an officer on the phone as like stealing someone's identity just for the sake of exaggeration, but he does seem to be very good at convincing people on the phone. So I'm guessing a lot of the stuff at the orphanage, because they're not law enforcement, they're not trained to spot behavior like this, I think. But yeah, on the embassy level, even the cops, I think the FBI as well, they definitely should have had some red flags. I mean, no matter how much the family seems to vouch for him, they should definitely have kept some interest in like what the hell is really going on over here.
I mean, even with the orphanage, my thing is, wouldn't they have like bedrooms with like bunk beds and stuff for like this kid to sleep in and shit? I don't know. My thing would be an orphanage wouldn't just leave a kid alone like that, because he could be a danger to himself, is the thing.
Dude, just about the spending the night in the office thing, honestly, that could have just been like a add-on in the story. Like, I think it does like the truth sort of goes out the window when you start stylizing in a documentary. Like maybe, like really can't trust a lot of what he says in his interviews, because he could just be saying that as like he is in front of the camera now, right? Like he is, you can see it in his face in his interview that he's enjoying his time. Like Shantanu even pointed out that he smiles when he talks about a successful impersonation,
That
I
is
guess.
true. I feel like then that makes this documentary a lot more difficult to discuss, because the entire documentary is basically like him telling his story. So it's hard to, like, if everything he says is bullshit, which it probably is. Shatru, you're probably very right in terms like what you can't rely on what he says, but the documentarian relies on what he says. Like that's how the documentary is framed. Makes I feel like, would this still be a documentary if it's such a stylized, like single perspective story from a guy who is a pathological liar?
Yeah, that's why I call it like a cheat documentary. Like you can tell someone that you watched a
Yeah.
documentary today, but really you just watched like a sort of highly produced YouTube video. But like honestly, I don't like to compare this to like a YouTube video, because a lot of YouTube videos do have, like, they seem to give you at least something, like when I watch a hour long YouTube video about crime, it's usually juicy enough. Like there's just not a lot of juice in this, I feel like. What about you, Hamad?
I I really tend to agree with Natalia. How are these orphanages even believing his age? I just feel like, yeah, even Shantanu points this out. They come out really incompetent in this whole fiasco.
I actually believe this was like a red herring for the conspiracy theorists, because the guy, when this case initially got like attention, was when he was exposed for being an imposter. And then his story was that till then it was that he had been abducted and been a part of human trafficking, and then he was being kept on some naval base that was being operated by American soldiers, and he was used as a sex slave. Maybe he was implying a lot of things. And if you believe the story of the documentary, as far as the documentary goes, he was an imposter. So then all of those become lies, right? Like he was just making that stuff up to make his own difference in eye color believable, or like his change in accent. A lot of it was depending on his disappearance, that he underwent a lot of change in his disappearance. But if all those stories are false, if he's just not Nicholas Barclay and he doesn't have to prove his change, then I guess those accusations go away, right? Like maybe the military funded this documentary and they've basically given a career to this director. Just for context, I mean, the director is now working on a project with Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo. There was another name in there that I'm forgetting, but like fairly big names. And like he's become a proper like crime thriller guy now. I think he's done 2 or 3 films. And this is also on Amazon.
I mean, I will directly poke holes in that. Soham, if he was really abused by all these people, then why did he flip and straight up say that, oh, this family is so scary. I need to reveal it to you that I am not.
No, no, dude.
He's such a attention seeking
The
guy.
conspiracy would be that Nicholas Barclay was abducted and taken into slavery, right? Like this is not Nicholas Barclay. This is just the imposter.
So I think I should give a little bit of context on Nicholas Barclay. At the age of 12, my man has 3 tattoos. He was also starting to indulge in substances. He was probably headed for juvenile detention that summer. Like, he was getting into that much trouble. I just want to point this out. He's not some innocent little boy. I don't want people to get that idea that, oh, he's an innocent 12-year.
Dude, I think that kind of supports my theory. He seems like he could very well have been looking for trouble and, found it.
It could be, but it could also be that he just ran away.
I mean, he definitely ran away, dude. I don't think that's really being contested. I mean, normally we like to end an episode with just outcomes or, what has happened in the story since then. But the only change I could think of was that this filmmaker's career really took off. I don't think there's been any update in the case itself. this is a whole lot of implication and no outcome. But Frederick himself has been a little active. I think he's getting some attention.
So the case that happened in like 1997. Since then, he tried to pose as, like we talked about, right? Like other young French boys, other young Spanish boys. But he did get married in like 2007, and his wife left him in 2017 for another man. And so he had like 3 kids with her, and then I think he met someone else and he had like 2 more kids or something. So he has 5 children, which is honestly a little wild. Oh my god. And I mean, this is from like his Wikipedia page, where apparently he told the newspapers in 2012 that he will act as an imposter no more, and that his like impostering days are behind him and everything. So far it's been pretty quiet on that end. I think even this movie came out in like 2012, right? So there hasn't been much news for the past 10 years. But who knows? Maybe he's just impostering as another young boy and he's just doing a fantastic job at it. And he hasn't been caught
Dude,
yet.
can you imagine a 50-year-old trying to pass off as dude, that would be insane.
I mean, he did try in like his mid 20s to be a 15-year-old by like.
Dude, but mid 20s
Yeah,
is
no,
a
that's
whole
true.
different thing, dude.
Yeah.
I am mid 20s right now. I'm not saying I could pass off as a 14-year-old, but me right now and me twice my age right now is a whole different thing, right?
That's true. Yeah, I feel like I could pass off as like if I cut my hair.
Dude, you can easily pass off as a kid. I don't think anyone would be that surprised.
I think what's harder to believe is that I am an adult, considering how often I get ID'd when trying to buy like scissors and stuff. So
I think that's the first conspiracy to emerge out of this podcast. Maybe you are in a minor.
Bro, she got ID trying to buy drainage cleaner.
Why would you get ID?
yeah,
I guess it is an exothermic reaction. It could be kind of dangerous. Dude, but then they must have thought you were like 5 years old or something if they don't
drain
want you playing
cleaner.
with explosives.
Yeah, dude, I was like, seriously, and the shopkeeper was like, yeah, there's powerful stuff in there. I'm like, fucking drain cleaner. Oh my god, these people are a joke, dude.
I was just thinking though, it would have been really funny. Like, imagine being married to the imposter, and I guess the spark is out. You don't really feel the connection anymore, and you start talking to some guy on the phone, and he finally says, "You know, why don't you run away with me?" And you go to the fucking railway station or whatever, and it's fucking the fucking imposter, dude. Like, it would be so fucked
This
for
is like that
her. It
fucking.
could, like, he could play such mind games with his
This
wife.
is like the Pina Colada song.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, they both are
Yeah.
unaware in the song. In this case, he would very well be like fooling her. The director definitely, I mean, we've spoken quite a lot about this, but like, yeah, he definitely is one of the, if not the only person who benefited. I'm guessing the private investigator in some way also benefited from this documentary. I don't think his life was up to much if he was so keen on this old story. I mean, he just went into some guy's backyard and dug it up. I thought that was very rude. You know, he could have. There were other ways to test his theory. I feel like he didn't really have to go. And he also only dug up like one small section, for all we know. So he just went and destroyed a section of his and didn't even really do like a thorough check.
Yeah, the private investigator very much gave me vibes of like he is trying to pursue fame.
He's a vulture.
Yes, yeah, he's a vulture. I guess, yeah. We never really talked about the characters within.
If you
the
do want to say
documentary.
something about one of
I
them,
mean, they're very unimpressive.
yeah, a lot of them were not very necessary.
I mean, for context, the documentary frames the private investigator as like the first one to question whether, like, to discover that Nicholas Barclay isn't like that. Nicholas, like that Frederick is, like he's not Nicholas Barclay, and that this is another person pretending to be him, because he noticed that the ears don't match, which I love.
That's
I'm gonna.
yeah.
This is gonna be in part of my vocabulary now.
This was
And
a thing that was mentioned in Two and a Half Men. Like Charlie Sheen, his character, he used to determine the age of a woman by looking at her ears. Like basically, ears don't lie. It's such a weird thing. I've completely forgotten about this, but like when you just mentioned it, it came back to me.
but yeah, so like that way the private investigator is crucial to plot development because he starts the whole investigation against Nicholas Barclay and he like digs deeper and everything. But yeah, there is like he is very clearly a vulture, and the second he finds this out, he's like, yes, this is my time to shine and I will show that I am a good private investigator and this is going to be my moment, and shit like that, just like a kind of a sleazy guy.
But honestly, I would like to use this as a segue into our last little segment. How did this documentary change our perspective? And I would like to start here because I mean obviously you know about like stolen identities as an issue. From The Office, I think Dwight says identity theft is not a joke, Jim. It's not as if this concept was new to me, but then to really think about the implications of just assuming someone else's identity, it's kind of wild that when you want to look up Nicholas Barclay as like a case of a missing person that happened in 1994, when you just Google Nicholas Barclay, the first thing that pops up is a Wikipedia article for The Imposter, like not the film, but the actual person, Frederick Like he gets his own fucking Wikipedia page, and Nicholas Barclay redirects to him. Like that's how much of a impact his impersonation made. Like this is what the internet probably thinks he is synonymous with Nicholas Barclay, right? Like I don't think they really can tell. And when I say internet, I just mean like web crawlers and shit that try to just collect data about something. It's not an actual person. What about you, Hamad? Did this documentary change your perspective as like a fan of true crime? Were you disappointed?
Not really. It was a very unique case, I must say. The case was very interesting, but it did not change my opinion or like it didn't introduce me to anything new. Identity theft, sure. I mean, like it's bad. Like so Som, you made a really good observation about like some YouTube videos are so good. Like the recent pig butchering segment by John Oliver. I found that more informative than this 1.5 hour, 1 hour 30 minutes or whatever this documentary was. But it is a very unique case. Like I'll give it that much. Like not Bourdain, but like the actual case of Nicholas Barclay is like quite interesting and out there. Like I guess yeah, like it introduced me. I know of many missing cases where people are never found, but this one, yeah, it was kind of cool. Like the case was pretty interesting and with the whole
When I
family.
said YouTube videos, I didn't really mean like just videos on YouTube. I mean, calling John Oliver a YouTuber is kind of it's a little insulting, I think, and
I
I'm not
That was
even
my
like a
same.
real
That
fan
was my
of
exact same
John
No, no,
Oliver.
no.
reaction.
That was not
Dude,
my. That was not my
I
intent
would
at
not.
all. But like
No,
the
but
I
like
know.
I
night was
was
actually a much longer thing. Like conveyed so much more. Like it was so well researched. Which he's known for. But it's only a 20 minutes segment. Here they almost had 2 hours to convince us of something or like shows, and they didn't make use of it. And let's not pretend like they didn't have a budget. Like I know it feels a
yeah.
little off, but that guy is like gone places after
Yeah, no,
this.
I definitely agree. And like when I said YouTubers have some really good videos, like I'm actually saying like people who really don't have much of a budget, like they aren't really going out there to find new footage. They are just trying to put forth unknown information out to the public. So they are like their research is what's impressive about like a YouTuber's documentary about something. Yeah, but like what about you, Shantanu? What do you would are you like completely put off by true crime after
Not.
this?
I mean, not completely put off. I just think this documentary was kind of. It was. It was too much. It was very dramatized for a story that did not need to be this dramatized. But in terms of my perspective change, like the documentary kind of got me thinking how easy it used to be to fake an identity or just start a new life, because like copying passports and just changing your name, copying identity documents before the internet, before everything was digital, was so easy, and how much more difficult something like this would be to do today. That's just a random tangent I was thinking about. Apart from that, not really. This didn't change my perspective much.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, nowadays with the digital footprint, it's very difficult to, I think, assume a random identity and also to shake off your own. But what about you, Nats? How did this make you feel? How did this documentary make?
I mean, this is just gonna get added to the list of bad true crime that I've watched. But I think it was it, an interesting portrayal of like grief and denial, especially from the sister. I feel like we saw the sister go through like a full range of emotions in terms of like finding Nicholas and like the relief of finding her brother again, and then like the grief after realizing that like she was fooled as well, and I felt like that was like genuine sadness there, which is why like this ties into my this quote unquote ties into my theory of like the sister wasn't as involved because she did seem genuinely upset by everything that happened. But yeah, I feel like this documentary would have been a very, very interesting exploration of denial and of like trying to fool yourself to get back this like to get back to like the status quo and of grief and processing.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, actually. We think of the family as doing something nefarious when they are letting this guy back into their life, even though there are signs of him not being the same guy. But that was maybe just them coping, maybe they never really made peace with the fact that their son just ran away from home. And who knows, man, like maybe the real Nicholas Barclay is out there listening to this documentary, or maybe he watched The Imposter. Who knows? That would be kind of crazy
Not
though.
to sound insensitive, but one last thing. If you watch this documentary, I'm sure he's not regretting his decision to leave them.
I mean, I'm guessing he ran and things were probably better. I mean, I wouldn't say better, but it was probably better for him in his perspective, because I'm guessing he could have gone back, right, if it was worse out there for him, if he survived all of this. By the way, there's a very good chance he just ran away from home and something very bad happened and no one ever found out. Yeah, but with that, I think we can end this. If you have any suggestions, you can email us at escapeintorealitypodcast@gmail.com. You can also rate us on Spotify and Apple. But until next time.